Good morning. Uh, as always, this is a strange way to convene and dive into our communal, foundation, which is the platform, but we're going to go with it. I want to start by placing us in 2017, really not you all, but taking you to where I was in 2017. And I remember a particular sinking feeling. A woman I had spent a decent part of 6 years pursuing, and the use of that word is jarring, but please excuse because it's only accurate. She left me after a longer 3-month process of severing our ties. I remember feeling the room spinning around me, so desperately wanting to escape this pulling at the core of my being. I actually forced myself to sleep because I didn't want to think anymore. I was scared where my thoughts would lead. I woke up the next morning at 5 a.m., did 100 push-ups, studied French, and decided I never wanted to feel like that again. But the journey to that place and out of it was and is long and never ending. I had to confront how I got there. As a prisoner to some dreams, a failure at my spiritual charge, losing sight, or never having it of what it meant to love. This story, in fact, begins earlier, in my youth. I saw my mother, the unquestionable head of my household, provide and determinedly establish home ownership in a part of Brooklyn that met her criteria for a place to raise children. I saw my father aloof of present in my household. Their relationship, its friction, its lack of attunement shaped what I thought about love from a young age. My mother's frustration with my father, or the way I was able to understand it then, was due to the fact that he didn't provide enough support to the project he had set out on, to raise a Black boy to be successful in a white world. The bitterness this elicited from her stuck with me. And I remember very young feeling that they were better apart than together. Many children feared their parents' divorce, and I welcomed it. The message to me on how to love was clear: support. Had my father offered more support, my parents' marriage would have worked, and I would have been saved from witnessing their intense screaming matches. But then I realized there was another lesson I learned. Don't let someone too close to you. They can derail you, make you unpleasant, threaten the very thing you want to become. I left behind my hometown, the religion of my youth, but this idea of love stayed with me. And why is it important? Because it took me until that moment in 2017 to realize how I participated in every romantic relationship as an adult was shaped by that experience of my parents' relationship. I keep people at bay. I'm stubborn with my sense of self. I need to protect my purpose. I need my joy to give. I need to serve. I need to write. I need to create. And no one will stop that. Yes, this is still a platform about love, or rather intimacy. But I had not realized that my conception of love was fraught. I had thought of love as a state of being. I wanted to be in love or fall in love. But the concept of love as a verb escaped me. More specifically, the centrality of intimacy in love escaped me. After years of intense infatuation with people I expected to be my saving grace, the ones who would deliver me into acceptance, I had finally faced the fact I was wrong. Something had to give. And then the therapist suggested to me a book called Attached. The book uses attachment theory to explain how some people function in relationships and give them language and scenarios to come to terms with their own capacity for intimacy. Attachment style is a way of describing the response one has to the process of building intimacy. Intimacy is closeness, but it's also much more than that. It's allowing a person to be shaped by another person, to be known by another person, inspired and pushed to growth by another. Who's taking chemistry? It's like a bond, a molecule. A molecule takes energy to form, and it takes energy to break apart. What is formed has a different quality and function than what they were when they were apart. It is theorized that the parent-child relationship from intimacy, as well as experiences of dating and or trauma, shape the way people form intimacy or the response to attachment. Some people have a secure response, meaning they can experience the process of building intimacy without disorientation. They can communicate effectively through conflict, connect and disconnect when needed. Others have an insecure response. For them, forming intimacy can be disorienting. Some move away from intimacy, preferring independence, like myself, or others induce an anxious response. Or for others, intimacy induces an anxious response that makes one fear a person may leave them. So they seek out constantly in ways that end up building intimacy more difficult. Some have a mix of insecure attachment. We call that fearful avoidant, where connection can be reminiscent of chaos, disorder. So they end up replicating that chaos in the relationship, pushing and pulling in their relationship, back and forth. These styles can change during lifetime, and with effort, it's possible to become more secure in attachment. These classifications are not meant to be a measuring stick of one's worth or capabilities, but only to offer framing and vocabulary to think about how one communicates, deals with conflicts, and handles disappointment. This language is important for me because it validated for me and for anyone trying to build intimacy that process is a difficult thing. The possibility that two people might somewhat agree on what they're feeling, experiencing, working towards sounds simple, but it's not. It's also not the story about connecting or love that I received. When I was young, I thought love was something I would find, like walking down the block, I would find it. Sitting there ready to be collected, shown off, married, impregnated, found. I would travel to some far off place, maybe Ghana, and I would find love there. Repeat list of things. There's something missing from my equation. A person, a relationship, a dynamic, any notion of something that is shared and cooperatively imagined, co-created. And it's not only my fault. I love music, and a lot of music spreads this kind of idea of love, this almost something that happens to you. Our other phrases like falling in love fail to describe what being in love or loving actually means. Who knew real love or intimacy will require us to be aware, sensitive to our histories, to our needs, the bravery in terms of willing to be vulnerable and be ready, willing, humble, the intentional in creating space for others to do that there too. This involved deep parts of us internally and externally, expectations about the future, cultural signifiers that we accomplish. And though we operate in similar contexts, how we relate to these ideas can be different. Reconciling between two people is a never-ending process, which can be fun, frustrating, or dangerous. Yes, trying to develop intimacy can be dangerous because if equal power is not there, one's vulnerability can be exploited. Your power in a relationship is important, the power to do what you choose to do, to say what you need, to have your own independence, to realize who you are. Sharing power is difficult, as you can see. It requires communication, respect, trust, and equality. One person making all the decisions is not equal. Someone assaulting their partner is not respect. Following a person around, watching their social media, being possessive or jealous excessively are not ways to form trust. And this may seem obvious, but what I'm getting at is when we're trying to bond with another person, our walls come down. And some people can take advantage of that. Again, and that can leave us vulnerable. We share with a person in our lives that will know how to make us happy, but they also could know how to tear us down. Sometimes people take care with that privilege. Sometimes a person can be our hero, and it's and someone who can make us happy, and our enemy is someone who can hurt us. They might try to harm their partner through their body, emotions, social media, money, or sex, or identity. A year and a half ago, I worked with a student, and 1 year later, that student reached out to us, me and my coworker, and said she wanted to interview us. I thought, okay, senior project. Yes, I want you to graduate. I'll help. We'll help. But as my partner and I began the interview, we learned this young woman was in an abusive relationship while she was in our class. Abuse is when one partner takes power and control over the other partner. It makes it difficult or dangerous to leave. I asked, what was the moment that clicked for her? And she said, when we talked about the types of abuse and she read about physical abuse, she realized she did not deserve to be hit. But when asked, what would she want other people to know about leaving an abusive relationship, she said it's going to be hard to get away. She said she didn't remember how she found the strength to not call or reach out to her partner to finally leave. And she's lucky. Many people do not make it out of abusive relationships, especially communities that have social vulnerability, like Black women, trans folks, LGBTQ. What does attachment and intimacy have to do with ethical culture? I mentioned at the very beginning of this platform that I failed at my spiritual charge, in which I see as fostering ethical relationships. Also, Carol pointed out that there was a slight typo in the description. It was tenets, not tenets, right? So one of the tenets of this community, right? Building ethical relationships, also in honoring inherent worth. Felix Adler founded ethical culture partly based on the idea that relationship can be a transcendent space, that we could be transformed by the people we engage with. Bring out the best in them, and we will bring out the best in ourselves. Felix Adler spent his life rejecting other theories of ethics, partially because they eschewed the importance and the centering of relationships. And that's why the household is central to his philosophy. While he's somewhat rigid and Victorian in his opinions of family life, he was unwavering in his faith that at the heart of a stable society is a home that upheld and modeled his idea of the spiritual ideal. In Reconstruction of the Spiritual Ideal, he wrote, every person should just thus be a spiritual artist, a portrait painter. The portraits painted having this virtue in them that they are not only like the spiritual original, but that the original beholding them is stirred to a great love for this, his spiritual sublime counterpart, and is moved in some measure to comfort to. So what I see that as meaning is that you form a bond with some person and they have some inkling of who that best person you are can be. And then you in turn begin to reconcile with that person, trying to, inspired by that connection, trying to meet that best person that you can be, and vice versa. In relationship, we're meant to see the best that people can be. We elicit in that and how we treat them, and they reflect that and elicit that out of us. Lois Kellerman, an ethical culture leader in Marriage from the Heart, her book, which I think is an ethical culture classic, spends a lot of time talking about the work in cultivating the relationship as a space, a sanctuary, where there exist pieces of each person intentionally. It involves mindfully choosing to see and respect a partner, offering, seeking healing from a person, balancing commitment with a disposition to inevitable change. So this feels like a spiritual charge to me. Felix Adler is co-signed by many, like afterwards. Like I see some of what Felix Adler is talking about in James Baldwin. James Baldwin frames a comparison between the artist's relationship to society as a love relates to a lover. Society's never, James Baldwin said it, said, societies never know it, but the war of an artist with his society is a lover's war. He does at his best what lovers do, which is to reveal the beloved to himself, and with that revelation to make freedom real. In August, we're putting together sort of a curriculum that looks at how people have innovated certain ideas that are foundational to the philosophy of ethical culture. And one of the people I want to highlight is Simone de Beauvoir, who deals with existentialism by taking this famously individualistic philosophy and making it an ethic of relationship. She says passion is converted to genuine freedom only if one destines his existence to other existences through the being, whether thing or man, at which he aims, without hoping to entrap it in the destiny of the in it itself. Our capacity to be free and pursue our projects allows other people to also realize their projects and be free. It reminds me of Thich Nhat Hanh, who wrote, "Love in such a way that the person you love feels free." Another person I think would love Felix Adler would be Brene Brown. Brene Brown, in her book, Dare to Lead, says that vulnerability is the cradle of the emotions and experiences that we crave. Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, joy, and belonging. Her reframing courage as the ability to be vulnerable, to feel, is also the foundation which changed leadership and healthy relationships grow from. Building trust is a constant effort, like collecting marbles in a jar. Creating space in a relationship, business, or community for intimacy and vulnerability, she calls crafting a safe container. I wrote this inspired by her book, Am I a Safe Container for You? Wrong question. Have I cared for my soul long enough? Have I cared for my soul enough in order to have the feet, the will, the still to build one for us? Although her language helped me identify some things about myself, I realized that I armored myself against vulnerability, against feeling the hard things, thus cut myself off from the highs of those feelings too. That to grow and to love, I had to be able to offer belonging, but I had to offer belonging to myself first. Does that sound familiar? Inherent worth, right? So I, like others, have to hold in tandem the possibility of the disorientation that I might feel from building relationships, but also the possibility of transformation. I now realize that how I love is how I love. It comes with its advantages, its disadvantages, but I'm worthy of love and connection. I'm worthy of love and connection. Because being able to love does not stop me from accomplishing what I seek. It can deepen it, make it realer. So that losing I is not losing myself. It is fortifying myself so that I can be strong and brave enough, malleable enough to share a deep space with another person. So I want to sort of begin to sort of offer some of the tangible descriptions of what secure attachment looks like. So the 4 fundamental things are self-care, attunement, reliability, and comfort. And so what I sort of translate that as is like how, sort of self-care, the ability for one to have a knowledge of what they need, to be able to provide it for themselves in some ways, but also offer boundaries and be able to communicate that to another person. Then attunement, being willing to know and try to understand the emotional workings of another person, and to someone to offer that same energy and attention to you. Then there's reliability, right? So relationships, the secure part of relationships, is having some ability to trust that this person is going to be there or know how they're capable of being there and offering them the same thing. And there's comfort, right? It's hard to be in a relationship and not feel settled. We have varying needs for comfort. Some people it's financial security, other people it's emotional security, but we have different, right? And that's understanding that is important, because to create that kind of safe container, one has to feel like this, it's a place they can come to and be okay. So I'd say some ways of fostering, right? And again, I'll say this probably multiple times in the next few minutes. I think this doesn't only apply to romantic relationships, but it applies to communities, work environments, family relationships. And so some of the things that I've tried to keep as practice in relationship: accepting subtle invitations to build trust, exchanging the definition of arc meanings. What does love look like to me? What does love look like to you? And then lastly, what does love look like to us? And this is the way I like to sort of categorize the engagement with attunement, as being engaged in the dance of attunement, spatial affectual awareness. When I move this way, how does this person move? Noticing, and sometimes it's not something that can always be explicitly communicated, but that curiosity to notice. And I think lastly, cultivate joy, experiment, play. I think this is harder these days than it may look. The weight of the insecurity of our time and not knowing what might happen the next day, this can make it impossible to feel like one can play. But I found that outward attempt and offering of even seeking joy, trying to create joy in another person, fills me with a kind of joy, kind of like a sort of medicine that alleviates some of the things that I'm struggling with, being in that position. So, and lastly, treating each moment in a relationship as a space of reconciliation, discovery, and transformation. I realized this year that I had come to the wrong lessons from my childhood. Because after my father and my mother divorced, my father remarried to his childhood sweetheart. Or maybe actually, they were more like friends. And she passed away in April, Miss Laura. And it took me until then to realize how that relationship, he was a completely different person, that it had changed who he was. I wrote a poem about it called Harlem Lost the Love. 145th used to buzz. From the terrace, you could see the spot where this begun. It was 2008. The prettiest young girl was tugging at my arm. I was just talking. I wasn't doing no harm. And you said to me so gently, shape that ass up, act right, and direct your attention towards her. It was the first time in my life someone told me to act like my daddy. Now I write through tears, trying to hold on to memories, lessons I couldn't quite learn yet. Grateful and heavy for love. Yes, enough to mourn it.